Hello again. My name is Haris Rabišević and I'm representing Sochi organization. Among the other things, I'm also a cognitive scientist, so I do a lot of studies in cognitive psychology. And one of the findings of cognitive psychology is that the worst time to give a presentation is after lunch. So guess what? I'm giving a presentation after lunch. But I'm still inspired, so I hope that you too are. With a Turkish coffee, I think we'll all be awake.
That is why we had to.
Yeah,
Turkish. I was wondering why they force us to drink.
Okay, although my Turkish is a bit rusted, I have to say something in Turkish. Misafirperver lingiş için teşekkür ederim. Burada olmak harika.
Whoa!
It is a great pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank our host for great hospitality, for the detailed instructions. It was really lovely. I really enjoyed it. So we didn't have much time wandering around. We came directly to the destination. And although the next slide would actually come, usually it would be the last slide, I would like to use it and to say it now. And that is a big, big thank you to all of you, to all the people and organizations who are dedicated to promoting the dignity and the social inclusion of persons with intellectual disabilities and creating a better world for all. So thank you all for your commitment, for your hard work, and for all your dedication that you are putting into these efforts. Now, actually, the topic of this today's lecture, as Matthias said, I'm not an expert in recruiting strategies, but actually I could find some things that are of great interest to me, and they are actually related to the recruitment of volunteers. Like volunteers do so many useful things to help us out, to help us organize all these events. So without them, I think all these efforts would be less valuable. So that will be the general topic of this talk. Of course, I will mention some general things about the benefits and health benefits of sports in general. So as you can see, sport brings individuals and communities together, highlighting commonalities, what we all have in common, bridging cultural or ethnic divides. Sport provides a forum to learn new skills such as discipline, confidence, and leadership, and it teaches core principles such as tolerance, cooperation, and respect. When these positive aspects of sports are emphasized, sport becomes a powerful vehicle to which the United Nations can work towards achieving its goal. Actually, this was taken from the United Nations website and emphasizing the importance of sport to bring people together. And now we can continue with this. The sport events not only provide an opportunity for people with intellectual disabilities to compete, but also unite groups of people both regionally and nationally, and empower and enrich their lives, thus affecting their overall quality of life. And we can see here, I mean, we are the best example of many nationalities coming together with the same purpose, with the same goal of promoting sport events for people with intellectual disabilities. There are numerous, of course, benefits in sport participation, some of which are improved physical fitness, better health, better self-confidence, better self-image. So these are things that are universal for everybody. And actually, I'm not sure, have you done any studies within your organizations or about the general health status of the people participating in many events? But many studies have documented declines in physical activity and increases in obesity among adults with intellectual disability in many countries. Thus, we can see the serious issue of obesity, which in turn affects health status of all people, but this is especially prevalent in population of people with intellectual disabilities. And we can see that health screenings that were conducted in 1999, 2001, and 2003, they revealed that many athletes were obese or overweight. Also, surveys of Special Olympics coaches across the world have provided a consensus that athletes are in need of fitness training above and beyond what they receive from their sports practices. I think that every one of us could use, would benefit from more participation in sports events, to be more, included in various sport activities. And now we are coming to the core of this presentation, and that is volunteer. So, Special Olympics programs are also a unifying force for communities, promoting volunteerism and civic responsibility, and teaching inclusion and sensitivity towards people with intellectual disability. This was taken from the Special Olympic site, 2009. And the success of sporting events such as Special Olympics, like I already mentioned, as well as many other types of events, is highly dependent on volunteer support. So, how do we do it? How do we recruit volunteers? But before we go there, I would like to say something about generally volunteering. How do we define it? We define volunteering as any activity in which time is given freely to benefit another person, another group, or another cause. Data from 2009 indicated that there are more than 800,000 Special Olympics volunteers around the world, and they are lifeblood of the organization. So this really stresses the importance of volunteerism in the whole event, sporting events, including Special Olympics. And one of the great values of volunteers is that they come from quite variety of backgrounds. So for example, you have students, you have lawyers, you have medical workers, you have nurses from all walks of life. And that is the strength of the whole movement. So diversity makes us much, much stronger. So there are two types of volunteers generally. The first are volunteers at sports clubs and organizations, and these volunteers generally coach, manage, or referee. And the second type of volunteers are volunteers who do it at special events. So these volunteers are involved with promoting the event, ticketing, ushering, security, logistics, accreditation, media, hospitality, merchandise, and medical support. So we can see actually that everybody can give their contributions in some area. If you are a sport person, if you like Kada did sport events professionally, then you will probably be belong to the first group. But on the other hand, if you cannot maybe participate on the sport level, professional level, then you can give your contribution on the second level. For example, selling tickets or whatever, medical support maybe. And what kind of recruitment strategies are we using to recruit volunteers? I would like to hear from all of you, how do you do it? But first, let us talk about this on a more theoretical level. So, it's important to understand what motivates a volunteer. What is your motivation to be a part of the event? It is important to understand these motives, as it's expensive to recruit, retain, and train the volunteers. I mean, we always feel somehow disappointed, to say at least, for example, when you have a highly professional volunteer who can do a lot and who, for example, leaves us, go for another organization, or it's just something that's hard to bear with. Motivations for volunteerism are complex and cross over several conceptual factors defined as solidary, purposive, and material. So let's see what's next. Special Olympics is an excellent example of a multifaceted event that depends on a large number of volunteers to manage the many aspects of the competition. Understanding the volunteer motivations behind Special Olympics volunteers may also be applicable to other large multi-sport competitions. So that can be applicable to Olympics in general, to other sporting events, world championships, and etc. And these are the types of motivations that we can actually group in certain categories. And one is solidary motives. So I wanted to broaden my horizons. I wanted to gain some practical experience. I wanted to work with different people. I could obtain an educational experience. I wanted to develop relationships with others. I wanted to interact with others. I wanted an opportunity to meet the athletes and see the games. So we will stop here, and I will ask some of the volunteers which one would they pick from this category, solidary category. So because I cannot, I only feel comfortable in calling out my students. I will call Benjamin to answer this question. So Benjamin, what would you say?
Well, I would say I wanted to work with different people.
Okay. You also?
For me, the practical experience.
Practical experience. Gain some practical experience. Yes?
My motivation is not here. I can say that the feeling of assisting somebody or some people or helping some others.
Oh, great. Well, I think we will have these kinds of motives in another category. So hold on with me. But these are generally some of the motives in the category of solidary motives that motivate people to participate in these events, to be volunteers. And now we will have, I think, the one that you just mentioned, and that is purposive. I wanted to help make the event a success. I want this thing to work. I wanted to put something back in the community, because the community gives to us, and you can see this example in many successful people, how they give back to their communities. You can see that in the example of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. I mean, they give back to their communities, and that's great. I wanted to do something worthwhile. I wanted to feel part of this community, that sense of belonging. Volunteering creates a better society. Volunteering at this event makes me feel better about myself. I wanted to help out in any capacity. Are there any, so which one would you pick, for example, to be your first choice from these motives? Anybody?
Maybe the first.
Yes? Okay, thank you.
Create a better society.
Oh, great. Such altruistic motives, great. Anybody else?
Maybe the first one, I wanted to help make this event a success, and also I feel like I wanted to feel part of this community is also a nice one. Yeah.
Great.
I choose to.
Okay. But actually, this is like something that you can work in your organizations. You can examine what are the motives. There are probably like tons of other motives that are not mentioned here, but it can lead you to examine, like to assess what motivates your volunteers to participate in the event.
I have a question.
Yes.
Very often in the last couple of years, we get volunteers that are coming to us by saying, I want to put something in my CV.
We have these kinds of motives as well. Great. Yeah. Okay, now the next category is commitment. My skills were needed. I'm expected to volunteer. I have past experience providing similar activities. Most people in my community volunteer, so if they are all volunteering, why should I not volunteer? Being a volunteer in this event is considered prestigious, and if I did not volunteer, there would be no one to carry out this volunteer work. So actually you can give different weights to different motives of the people. So, I don't know, it's really important what you consider to be, for example, the most valuable motives. And actually, for example, when volunteers come to your organizations and state their motives, what makes them stay longer and to be more dedicated? And maybe that would be really important for like branding strategies, marketing strategies that we were talking about, not in the sense of getting finances for some event, but maybe getting some human resources, some help in that area.
I think that what you have mentioned could be put in this category. I'm expected to volunteer because very many organizations expect actually from people to do something on the top to other activities.
Yes, and maybe connecting with my skills were needed. 20 years ago, I started volunteering. Me personally, I started volunteering in Special Olympics because of my knowledge of the English language. And then I stayed on 20 years later. So that
and motives should change.
Yeah, they do.
Yep. Okay, and the next category is external traditions. So I wanted to vary my regular activities. For example, I do some kind of activity. Then I want to change a little, maybe to add some refreshment to my life, and then I choose to volunteer. It was a chance of a lifetime. So it was an opportunity that you just cannot reject. You have to accept it. The next motive is not very stable. I will not put it highly on the list, but I will not have anything else to do with my time. So when I have nothing else to do with my time, I choose to volunteer. It's not something that's so stable. And I have more free time than I used to have. For example, I lost a job and now I have more time, so I can volunteer. So these are some of the external traditions. And we also have, in addition to these, we also have family traditions. My friend's family were also volunteering. And this is very often the motive of some people. Actually, for example, for students, very often you see that their friends are volunteering, so why should not I volunteer? A friend or relative competes in the event. That's a really strong motive. For example, if you're a member of a family is participating, then of course you want to be a part of that event. I wanted to continue my family tradition of volunteering, and also I'm involved in sport. For example, you can see many students who are involved in sports that want to do volunteering, for example, in sports events. Benjamin, for example. He has sporting connections, so that's why, that's the reason. So, now when we see these categories of different motives for volunteering, let's see what the directors and managers of Special Olympics can do to recruit these volunteers. So it is critical that managers or directors develop effective marketing and recruitment strategies for finding volunteers, as well as develop plans for retaining knowledgeable and experienced individuals for future activities. So we will stop here, and I will ask you to comment on this. Do you have any strategies or plans how to recruit and how to retrain high-quality volunteers?
We in Serbia use the existing volunteer organizations, like in, for instance, in a community there is already a volunteering organization with structure and and we use them. We use those kinds of organizations.
Like their services.
Their services.
Yeah.
Now it's more or less, after all of these years, it has become like a known thing, and when we have an event, they just say, you know, they reach out to us and you need how many people, and so it's kind of an ongoing thing now, but
And
that's how
it
we
works
started.
well.
Yeah, it works well, yes. It works well. That's how we use them, apart from family members and things like that. But we use the NGOs of volunteering services in our local community.
Great. Any other thoughts?
We're doing the same.
You're doing the same.
We are mostly co-working with universities and with the police academy. So the deans have command and the police students are. But before, we are doing the presentation, where they are going, for which event they are going. So every year, with every new school, we are organizing the presentation, and who attend the presentation, then they can sign up for a competition, for volunteering. And if it's the police academy, they have also a credit for it.
Great. So volunteers for events such as the Special Olympics exhibit this altruistic attitude and want to do something to help make the events a success. But I also think so how to motivate volunteers in sports clubs. Some clubs have great difficulties in recruiting volunteers. For example, what if there is no volunteering service in your community? How would you go about that and find volunteers? And other sport clubs continue to have hardly any problems at all. So we can see that there are actually differences on the sports club level on how they recruit and about their achievement strategies in recruiting these volunteers. Sports clubs can be characterized more as solidarity-oriented communities with homogeneous interests that reveal fewer problems, so a lower attrition rate. In addition, many sports clubs do not engage in any systematic and widespread recruitment procedures to fill their vacancies, and personnel recruitment is shaped to a high degree by informal rules. The dominant approach is to ask individuals directly or to disseminate information over informal communication channels. Recruitment is mostly non-standardized and takes place informally. So actually many organizations do not have a formal procedure on how to recruit volunteers. So they only have maybe word of mouth, or maybe they have like established cooperation with some volunteering association or university in order to volunteer, but there is no formal plan on how to recruit volunteers for events. So, how can decision-making process in sports club be examined adequately? This is because like this subject was divided on recruitment, selection strategies, and then on how sport clubs make decisions about certain things. So, what is the decision-making process in any sport club? I mean, we already talked about that on managerial level. For example, some organizations are more hierarchical, and some are more like we are all equal and we all participate in decision making. So what are the pros and cons of both approaches? So what do you think? Is it better to have a sport organization that is highly structural, where one person makes all the decisions, or is it better to have shared responsibility?
It depends. I must say, on the basis of Special Olympics Serbia, our clubs, to be a member of Special Olympics Serbia, need to have that structure that you're talking about, and made in accordance with the law of sports in Serbia. And they need to have that person, the one person that's deciding. And unfortunately, even though they might not necessarily work on the ground like that, we always need the name of the person who has made a certain decision. And they need to have that. They need to have that structure.
And that's much better, right?
Well, it's better for us as an organization when you want to find out who's responsible, or if, for instance, a coach from a club comes to you and says we have no money to go anywhere, then you know that you go to the top of to the person in charge of the club and you say, okay, listen, your guys said you don't have money. Can we assist you? Can we help you in any way? Things like that. But on the ground, if it actually works like that, I mean, it doesn't sound very democratic in some sense, you know. But if it exactly works like that, I'm not sure. But we, as an organization, only can look to that one person whose name we get is the responsible one.
Well, it has many advantages, definitely.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
It's actually, I think it's a normal situation that even though if we have a flat hierarchy, that there is always a person who
make the final.
who has more load, and that is okay. So it depends on managers how they are dealing with this kind of hierarchies.
Yeah.
So I think those two could be combined effectively.
You know of some example where is that in practice, these two approaches that were combined, or just theoretically?
Yes. Well, I can give an example from the university. It's not a very sporty, but
applicable.
it's similar. For example, we have winter semester 21, we have another study in a field of pedagogy for autism spectrum disorders. And we had a team at the very beginning because we wanted to have a flat hierarchy. And it didn't work because we all are intrinsically motivated. It's important for us that it functions, but there was not the person who was giving the impulse and saying, okay, it's the time to do that, it's the time to do this, let's do that. So it was a very good example. We were going like that for a couple of months, and then I said, no, we have to have a person who has it in a hand. At least to say it's a time to do this step.
Yeah.
So it can be combined very good.
Great, thank you for sharing your ideas. Let's see, any other? Okay, process control. Well, we talked already about that. Top-down, bottom-up type of club organization, advantages and disadvantages. Process for achieving consensus and reaching compromises in such clubs greatly impede both the quality and the rationality of decisions. You can see that. They're also impeded by the uncertainty regarding the behavior of individual actors. For example, when voting on measures at the General Assembly, members may decide in line with their own interests rather than the collective interests. So does this happen in practice? For example, that the member of the Assembly votes for his own good, for his own sake, and not for the greater good, let's say the club's good.
We don't have such a decision. We don't have to make such a decision like if the clubs prefer other things, because in Special Olympics Slovakia we have a program for the whole year, and the clubs are voting for the whole year-round program, and each sport has their own championship, each sport has their own seminars or workshops.
So actually they are pretty homogeneous in making decisions. I mean,
Yeah.
they all, yeah.
They are all voting.
They do not disagree much.
No. There is just winter and summer sports. That's it.
Yeah.
In the budget.
Okay, let's go for the final slide that is full of questions actually. Again, many questions, I have no answers, but actually makes you think about certain things. Like when I was preparing this presentation, I also learned a lot, like in the managerial sense of I'm more of a scientist on other levels, like cognitive and attentional processes, but still, I accepted this as a challenge to learn something new and to enhance my own abilities. So, what recruiting problems become the subject of decision-making processes? What people are involved in these decision-making processes? Which opportunities for making decisions are to be found? What changes to improve the effectiveness of recruiting can be seen? How do sports clubs deal with recruiting challenges? Well, most of these questions we actually answered in some way or the other. What divergences of common ground can be identified in their recruitment practices? Can decision-making practices of sports clubs be quantified? What are the consequences of their decision-making practices in relation to the appropriateness of solutions for existing recruitment problems? Maybe this looks too much, definitely looks too much, too many words on the slide, but still when you see these questions and go to time particularly to certain questions, then you will try to find the answers, and actually it might lead your thought processes to find better solutions for certain challenges that you might have. So actually that would be it. Thank you for your attention. Although it was a post-lunch presentation, I'm quite satisfied with your attentional levels, so I'm quite pleased. Thank you very much.